Derrick Henry fired back at Khalil Mack after the Chargers defender's comments following the Ravens' win over the Chargers, and Lamar Jackson reveals why he's so good against the NFC. All that and more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher, Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day, free and available for you all podcasting platforms. That includes a video form on YouTube where you can like and subscribe, also an audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day-a-week plus more daily Ravens podcast. We bring you Ravens news, analysis, updates, the whole 9 yards. So really appreciate all of the support here on the show. Today's crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Ravens is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Louie DiBiase of Locked On Eagles will be joining us shortly to break down the Ravens and Eagles Week 13 matchup for crossover Thursday. But first, I do want to get into a couple of Ravens news, notes, and quotes, as really we got a couple of juicy ones to dive into. First of all, we talked about on Tuesday's show, Khalil Mack talking about Derrick Henry and saying, oh, I'd love to play that team again, and it's easy for me to stop that, this, that, and the other. Well, Derrick Henry responded. He was asked about it, and, very short and sweet answer, but said, I don't care. That doesn't matter. We won. And it said that blank doesn't matter. We're a family-friendly show here on Locked On Ravens, of course. So we're not going to say what he actually said, but he said, we won. We won. And that's exactly how it should be. It wasn't any big thing. Derrick is a guy that, if you want to say he took the high road here, you can, but I genuinely think he just does not care. I don't think he cares. I think all he cares about is winning, and he doesn't care about Khalil Mack or anybody trying to talk like that or say something like that. And again, there are multiple varying opinions about how Khalil Mack's comments were. Were they disrespectful? Or was he trying to hype his team up? What were the actual motivations behind those comments? There were questions about it. Again, he said, that's the thing, man. I don't think it's hard to play against that guy, and hopefully we see this team again. That's all. So again, when you kind of think about it like that, whether you think it was disrespectful or not a big deal, Derrick Henry responds. And look, when a guy runs for 140 yards on you, it doesn't matter how you're using it. You can't say that. I don't care if, you stopped him on your side or whatever. Ravens averaged almost 6 yards a carry against that Chargers defense. Derrick Henry himself, again, those 140 yards, you can't say stuff like that. Like, the Chargers run defense is not very good. They haven't been good all year. The Ravens took advantage of that. Like, why are we saying these things? So Derrick Henry, hey, response, not something crazy, but still responds to the comments. And then Lamar Jackson was asked about why the Ravens are so good, why he is so good against NFC matchups. Obviously, Lamar is 23-1 against the NFC since being a starter, the one loss being to Daniel Jones. And he said, probably because we're not familiar with each other, I'd say that. That's what he said. He's going to give you that because he said, quote, I really have something else on my mind. I'm going to give you that. So, Lamar also said that he's not familiar with NFC teams either. So it's kind of like, it's a both sides type of deal. But that really is a thing. And we've been talking about that here on the show for a long time of the Ravens don't play NFC teams all that often. And so it's one thing to watch Lamar Jackson versus actually go out there and try to play against him. So Lamar, whether he's keeping the rest of the reasons tight to the vest, this, that, and the other, I do think he's correct. A very general reason is just because the Ravens don't see those teams very often. Speaking of, Ravens are seeing the Eagles in Week 13, which is another NFC opponent. And so Louie DiBiase of Locked On Eagles will join us to talk about key storylines, key matchups, and so much more coming up now. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody out there. Louie, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours as well. We're going to get into a little bit of fun conversation in the final part of the show that keys to victory. We might have to get a little sides conversation between you and I going because there are a bunch of different controversial opinions on those. But this game here, if you're comparing this to a Thanksgiving dish, I think it's the turducken. It's the main course. It's going to have a little bit of everything in it. We got Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, two good defenses. I can't wait for this one.
Yeah, no, I think this really is the game of the week. And Kevin, I think some might say this is a preview of Super Bowl 59. And I don't think that's crazy to say. I don't know if that's the favorite betting-wise, but it's two of the top 4 or 5 teams in the NFL. So, yeah, this is going to be a great one. And it's, I think, two of the most exciting teams in football. I grew up loving mobile quarterbacks. These are two of my favorite players in the league. To watch Lamar against Jalen, like, that's a fun battle. And it's two teams that invested in the running back position, and it's paying off dividends this year.
And for Locked On Ravens listeners, I do want to make it very clear here. Louie is one of the biggest Lamar Jackson guys
I'm
on
an
this
OG
network.
Lamar guy.
He is.
I remember tweeting in 2015, I'm not lying, I watched his first game ever against Auburn as a true freshman, and I'm like, who's this guy? Followed him the entire way. He's my favorite non-Eagle of all time when it comes to athletes. Like, Lamar's my guy. So I'm a Ravens guy. That's the AFC side of things for sure.
Hey. I think a lot of respect for both of us, for both teams, because I love what Philly's done. Howie Roseman is one of, in my opinion, the best GMs in this league, right alongside Eric DeCosta, two guys who are very proactive and going out there and making sure that all the holes are filled on their team. And I think that, yeah, you're right, Louie, where we're talking about a lot of people in the AFC are like, oh, well, it's going to be Kansas City or it's going to be Buffalo, and Baltimore's kind of like, not a lot of people are talking about them. In the NFC, everybody's talking about Detroit. It's like Detroit this, Detroit that. So this may be one of the underrated potential Super Bowl matchups. But let's start on the Philly side of things. Offensively, obviously, Saquon Barkley is drawing all the headlines. He's been incredible there. And, I mean, who didn't see this working out, right? I mean, the writing was, he's such a good player, and the Eagles have really maximized his skill set. For you, is that the biggest storyline for the Eagles on the offensive side of the ball, or is there something else you're looking at?
No, I think it is that. I think they're leaning into this identity. And it's something they've always been good at because of how well Howie Roseman builds the offensive line. For my entire life, the Eagles have had a good offensive line, which is crazy to say through 27 years of watching this football team. But it's true. Jeff Stoutland is one of the best offensive line coaches in NFL history. So they've always had a top running offense. But the organization has always wanted to build around the pass. They want to be a pass-first team, throw the football, invest a lot in the quarterback position. And over the years, even when they were a good run team, they're like, we still want to be a pass-first offense. This year, because Saquon Barkley's having a historic season where, like, there is a chance he breaks not only Chris Johnson's all-time scrimmage yard record, but he could also break Eric Dickerson's all-time single-season rushing yard record. Because of how historic that combination of Saquon and this offensive line is, they're finally just saying, no, we're going to win because of the running offense. We'll be opportunistic throwing the football, and we're not going to turn the ball over. And that's the formula, and we're going to finally stick to it, go all in on that strategy. And it's resulted in a 7-game win streak because when they were 2-2 at the bye and things weren't looking good, a lot of that was because of the inconsistencies in the passing game, and they were still being wishy-washy about what their identity is.
Yeah, and second best rushing offense in the league behind, obviously, Baltimore at number 1. And these two teams have leaned into their identities with the running back position. And when you talk about tiers of running backs, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry are in a tier of their own. It's a long way down to the next tier because those guys both have been so dominant. And I think what I love about Philly's offense, too, is it's not just Saquon and then you have no one else. I mean, you have all these weapons around Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley that can get the job done. You mentioned the offensive line, and that's such an underrated part of offenses. I feel like people don't understand that it really does all start in the trenches, regardless of how you want to play it, run blocking, pass protection. So Philly's done a great job of building out that roster, and I think the depth that they also have has really helped them in a lot of different spots this season, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where they have just turned into this absolute juggernaut. Yeah, the best rated pass defense in the league, a lot of rookie contributions there from Kenyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, a bunch of guys that are going to be on that team, hopefully for the Philly side of things for a long time. Keep them out of the AFC too, for the Ravens' sake, by the way. Extensions, more for those guys when it's time. But what has been the big thing that has helped this defense have so much success, and what's the biggest storyline for those guys?
Yeah, it's two things. They finally have a good, harmonious marriage between what the GM wants to build with this defense and what the coach wants as well. Vic Fangio understands this personnel to a T. He has maximized the strength of everybody on the first level, the second level, and the third. Zach Bond is a perfect example of that. This is a linebacker that was better as an outside player in New Orleans. Fangio says, no, I think he's an inside linebacker. Howie Roseman brings him in, and he's been, outside of Fred Warner, maybe the best inside linebacker in football this year. So I think it's been Fangio's one of the best assistant coaches in football, and he's showing that. But also, Howie Roseman I think he's learned from his mistakes. In past years when he had a bad defense, he doubled down. He'd spent a lot of money on proven veteran players, a lot of bridge, short-term deals, like to just stop the bleeding quickly. This year he finally said, no, we're going to commit to the youth. We're going to let these guys develop, all the Georgia boys up front, and we're finally going to draft secondary players early in the draft. They're faster, they tackle better, and they're more opportunistic than they were last year by a mile. So I think they just learned from the past, and they're just a really well-coached team on defense that finally makes in-game adjustments. That's something you didn't see a lot from Jim Schwartz or Jonathan Gannon or Sean Desai, but you're getting that from Vic Fangio on the weekly. So it's crazy. I think the defensive turnaround since the bye is more impressive than the offense, because the first 4 weeks, the defense there was a lot of questions, especially up front. You're not really having those question marks anymore.
How would you assess the year that Jalen Hurts has had so far?
Yeah.
I know that obviously it's been a very interesting trajectory for Jalen. I mean, obviously he hit like not peak, but he was so good a couple of years ago. Everybody's talking about, okay, this is the next great guy, top 2 quarterback, no question. And then obviously has been a bit of a rocky road for him, but this is a Philadelphia team. I mean, obviously he's led this team on a 7-game win streak, and he's been a big part of it. And I think that he has been a good player this season, but what has the trajectory been like this season for him, and what have you seen?
Yeah, I think he's been good, not great. I think there's been times of greatness, and it's why I'm still bought in. You look at that Bengals game where he went toe-to-toe with Joe Burrow, and he beat him in a shootout. Like, you have still seen moments of 2022 Jalen Hurts, even early 2023 Jalen, where he was an MVP favorite. The good thing is you're not really getting a lot of bad Jalen Hurts. That's something last year. It was a high and low, like a crazy variance, where some games he was elite, and some games he was just terrible. Since the bye week, he's had some great games, and then everything else is just steady. Even the games where it's okay, he's still completing over 66, 67% of his passes. He's not turning the ball over, which was a massive problem the first month of the year. And he's one of the best deep ball passers in the league. So that's why I'm more bought in on this idea that they can win a championship by running the football, because it's not in spite of the passing game. Every single week, they lead the league right now in explosive plays. They're getting that through the air, and they're not turning the ball over. Sure, are they as consistent in a volume perspective as 2022? No, but they're still having those moments that I believe, if push comes to shove, they're in a shootout with the Detroit Lions in January, and they need to throw the ball to win. I still think they can do it. So is it Jalen's best year of his career? No, but I think he's vastly improved from the collapse in 2023.
Yeah, I think that still Jalen is a good quarterback, and I think it is at least encouraging based off of what you mentioned, Louie, with how 2023 ended, that has not spiraled from there and continued.
He's running the ball so much better. There was an injury last year that really held him back, and for all the steps Jalen's taken as a passer, if he can't run, like, that's our bread and butter. That's what makes this offense great with Jalen Hurts. That's why you pay him, is the dual threat ability. The explosive first step is back. EPA-wise, he's number 1 in the league in design runs per EPA. So you're getting that back too, and that's been a huge element of this offense that returned compared to last year.
Yeah, and that's something that Baltimore's going to have to obviously take into account, because you cannot let that get going, because that's what makes the Eagles so dangerous on that side of the ball. But coming up in the second part of the show, we'll flip the script. We'll talk about the Ravens, one of the biggest storylines for them heading into this big Sunday matchup. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on this crossover Thursday edition between Locked On Ravens and Locked On Eagles. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, your live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. For this Ravens and Eagles game coming up on Sunday, Ravens open up as 3-point home favorites. So if you like the Ravens as the home favorite, maybe you like the Eagles as the road underdogs, be sure to visit FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back here on this crossover Thursday edition between Locked On Ravens and Locked On Eagles. I am Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens with Louie DiBiase of Locked On Eagles, breaking down what is going to be the game of the week. I think we're in for craziness. That's what I'm going to use the word. Just unbelievable between all the talent on both of these rosters, how well both teams have played for the most part this season. And since we dove into the Eagles in the first part of the show, we're going to flip it now and talk about the Ravens in the second part of the show. And I'll start off with the biggest storyline on the offensive side of the ball for the Ravens. That obviously is Lamar Jackson and the MVP caliber season that he is having. You know, those conversations always are loud, and especially now this time of year, Louie, when you have guys like Josh Allen in the conversation. Saquon's starting to hear his name pumped up. And I mean, I think after the games that he's had, you know, really consistently, I think it shouldn't just be a quarterback award, and that's just what everybody's settled on. I think we need to evaluate the position. But at the same time, I think the quarterback position is the most important in the league, and that is why the conversation surrounding MVP is what it is. But Lamar, there are so many conversations about him, and you know this, obviously, paying close attention to him, that, you know, he can't throw and he can't do this and he's a running and all this stuff. And obviously that was never true in the first place. And he's just blown all those narratives out of the water. He's number one in passing yards, number one in passing touchdowns, number one in total yards, number one in rushing touchdowns, number one in passer rating. I mean, it's just, we could go on and on and on and on. And that's what people were complaining about with him in the past. It was, oh, well, he doesn't throw for a lot of yards. You know, the stats aren't there. But the Ravens are winning by 30 anyway in some of those games. And it's like, well, that's the greatness of Lamar. And it's some of the stuff that you've obviously seen too in Philadelphia, some of the great talent that's come through there, is guys don't have to be this player that puts up 500 passing yards a game and 4 touchdowns to be considered great. Yeah, Lamar's had a decent team around him, but he also this year has had the best weapons he's ever had around him. Guys like Zay Flowers, who has stepped up in year 2, Rashad Bateman. And Lamar talked about Rashad and said that he views him as a wide receiver 1. They have trust in Lamar. He has trust in them. And I think we saw that especially on Monday Night Football, where Lamar airs that ball out to Rashad down the field and trusts him in contested tight coverage to come down with that football. But the thing that we've been talking about here all year, Louie, is the fact that in the past it was, all right, Lamar's going to throw that ball and Mark Andrews is down there somewhere. That was essentially the offense. And then back in the day, Marquise Brown was a guy who got a lot of targets. And then obviously Zay kind of replaced him last year. But this is a pick your poison offense in the passing game where he spreads this ball around. One week it can be Rashad, and maybe next week it'll be Tylan Wallace, or maybe Isaiah Likely gets in the fold.
Or our boy Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah, hey, that's a Eagle legend. Eagle legend, Nelson Aguilar. And, you know, there was another Eagle legend playing on Monday night in Jalen Reagor, who I have no idea how he's still on an NFL roster.
It's crazy
at this point. He dropped the big ball on third down that helped the Ravens out. So thank you to Jalen Reagor for that. But that's the big thing, and especially now with the way Derrick Henry has played this season, part of the reason you bring Derrick in is just because he's Derrick Henry. He has the gravity to him. It's like the Saquon effect in Philadelphia. Like, you have to know where he is at all times. You have to account for him, even if he's not getting the ball. That's what Derrick has brought to them this season. But it also allows you to take the Superman cape off of Lamar's back every once in a while, like you saw against the Chargers on Monday night, because that can be taxing for a guy. And it's honestly not fair to Lamar to have him have to be Superman every game to
Wouldn't
help
you say
them
that's
win.
kind of like the AFC title last year, Kevin? Like, if they have a Derrick Henry and they can turn to – they got Batman, but they didn't have Robin behind him. Like, if you can turn to a Derrick Henry and you have that multiplicity again. Like, I wonder if that was a big reason Baltimore did that. I know last year they leaned a lot into being more about the passing game, but I wonder if the signing of Derrick Henry is like, we want both.
It definitely was, and I think at least for a lot of Ravens fans, and maybe even for the organization, there's a lot of what if, because the Ravens had a deal in place to trade for Derrick Henry last year.
They did.
And the Titans vetoed it. So they could have had it last year, and they didn't. And then they fell into the trap in the championship game, and we all know how that ended. So we're now seeing that in full force this season. And Derrick Henry, for the first time all season on Monday, didn't score a touchdown. He scored a touchdown in every single game except for Monday night. So that streak is over. But I think, obviously, Philadelphia, you know, there are no slouches on the ground in terms of stopping the run. You have to be able to figure things out. You know, they're not the best run defense in the league. That's obviously what Baltimore has. But I still think that you have 2 good run defenses, 2 great running backs. It's a huge story to watch.
Yeah, it's kind of a strength-on-strength battle for both teams when it comes to their running offense against the opposing rushing defense. And I think both teams, including Baltimore, were so smart to tap into an overcorrected market that was running back, where almost the entire NFL was so in unison that they weren't going to invest in this position, that a Derrick Henry and a Saquon Barkley were available for around the same price as, like, what Gabriel Davis got with the Jacksonville Jaguars or Darnell Mooney. And so, yeah, when you look at like running back in a vacuum, could you get 75% of their production through a rookie contract, a player you get in day 3? Yeah, most of the time for sure. Like look at a Chuba Hubbard or a Jordan Mason, like what those guys did this year. But I think contenders had the flexibility to say, okay, this market went way too far the other way. So we can get now a stud, an offensive weapon. Forget about the name, the title running back. We could take a already great rushing offense to another level with an elite player. And I think both teams were so smart to do it. I'm not suddenly now the pay a running back every year guy, draft them in the first and second round every time. But for the Eagles and Ravens, Kevin, I just feel like it was the perfect timing and the perfect player. And I think they're both – that's why it's so hard to defend these teams. Like, how do you game plan for Lamar and Henry in the same backfield, or a Jalen Hurts or in a Saquon Barkley? It's a luxury that I think both teams had the flexibility to go for because their rosters were so complete already.
Yeah, and I think that Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley were the only 2 running backs worth paying at that time.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's what I'm saying, Kevin. I'm not going to suddenly do this for any running back.
Exactly. Yes.
These are rare players that, again, generational talents that were getting like almost no offers that were worth what they normally produce.
The running back market has been very overcorrect. Like that narrative has been very overblown, and that it needs to recorrect itself. I think there's a median,
right? I don't think suddenly teams are going to just start paying running backs because of this, but I think teams will see this and be like, okay, if there's another talent like a Saquon or a McCaffrey or a Derrick Henry out there, like if Bijan Robinson ever becomes an unrestricted free agent, he's not going to not get any offers and have to settle for like a $12 million deal.
No, and it shouldn't have been that way in the first place. And actually, Derrick Henry is such a huge proponent of getting running backs paid. Like he loves the conversation, and obviously, like it makes sense, right? But he's been supporting Saquon, Josh Jacobs, all those guys since day one. Obviously, Derek tweeted at Saquon during the Sunday night game and showed his support over there. And it's so difficult to stop those 2 players. And actually, I don't know if you saw this, Lou, but Khalil Mack had comments after the Monday night game about Derrick Henry saying, I'd love to play that team again. And, it's not that hard to play against that guy. And Derrick Henry responded to that. He said, I don't care. That doesn't matter. We won. We won.
I will say, I am Kevin for the Eagles. That is something I'm watching big time is – like the rushing defense has been really good, but Lamar Jackson specifically, when it comes to like not even just the design runs, but scramble mode. I look at when they played Joe Burrow, they got pressure on Burrow, but he was able to escape a lot. And without Brandon Graham or Bryce Huff in this matchup, I am a little nervous that when Lamar does pull that ball, if he does, the play breaks down, the coverage was good, but he can create and extend plays. That's where I'm a little nervous, like the Ravens will be able to extend drives because that's something the Eagles struggled with earlier this year, and without 2 of their top 4 guys in the edge rotation, that's something I'm definitely keeping a close eye on too.
Yeah, Ravens hit on a lot of their high leverage spots on Monday night, 3 of 3 on 4th down, including from their own 16-yard line, which was just unbelievably wild from John Harbaugh, and then also 8 of 15 on 3rd down. So they did a lot of good things in high leverage, but quickly defensively for Baltimore, I think the big thing that especially I'm looking out for is can they continue this momentum? Run game wise, they're great. They're number 1 in the league in terms of run defense, and that's been a big aspect. And obviously you talk about strength on strength. Ravens rushing offense versus Philly run defense. It's the same thing. Strength on strength, Philly run offense versus Baltimore run defense. But the pass defense has been the weakness. Now they have been improved recently, and a lot of that's been personnel changes. Marcus Williams, their $70 million man, no longer plays. He got benched. He was so bad they couldn't play him. Eddie Jackson, who was supposed to revitalize his career in Baltimore, became a distraction, got unhappy. He's cut. He's gone. So now you have Ardarius Washington playing next to Kyle Hamilton, and Kyle Hamilton is playing deep a lot more now. You usually look at Kyle Hamilton as a box guy, someone you can play all around the field, put up at the line of scrimmage, but they've been using him as a deep player, and his athletic gifts are just so incredible that he can get to the ball if it's a run play from the deep half. It doesn't matter where he is on the field. So that's where they've been using him, and he's been very effective in that role. They got Trey White, who in Los Angeles was doing nothing. Obviously, injuries were a big part of that, but he's come in and actually been a very solid rotational piece for them. And Brandon Stevens is a player that had a great year last year, but has kind of been up and down this year, particularly because he still does not know how to turn his head around for the football. So guys will be able to, especially there was a play against Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago. George Pickens showed late hands. So he's looking to the ball, doesn't know where the late hands come out, ball's immediately there. Stevens doesn't know where the ball is because he's not looking for it. So that's something that they need to get better at. Marlon Humphrey's playing like the best corner in football right now. He's been incredible this season. And even a guy like Nate Wiggins has been great as their rookie first-round pick. He's been really solid, too. This Philly offense has no shortage of weapons. Obviously, the injury status of a certain Eagles wide receiver is going to be of great importance to a lot of people. We'll talk about injuries coming up here as we get into the third and final segment. But Baltimore's defense, getting pressure is also going to be important. They've done a much better job at doing that. Players like Odafe Owe, Kyle Van Noy in the interior, Nnamdi Madubuike, and Travis Jones. They have talent. It's just a matter of putting it all together. And if they can get Roquan Smith back this week, that would be huge because it's going to be all hands on deck against Philly. That's a heck of a team.
And like I said, I mean, strength on strength, if the Ravens do limit Saquon, or at least comparatively speaking to what he's been doing, he has 500 yards in the last 2 games, then, I think the Eagles do need to push them back a little bit, though, and throw the ball more than they have been in the last few weeks. If they can get those if they can continue to have success though running the ball and can get those one-on-one man looks, that's when A.J. Brown cooks. I mean, that was the quietest 6 reception, 100-yard, and a touchdown performance on Sunday that I've seen. So they have the weapons to throw the ball too. And again, these are 2 of the most complete teams in football. So Kevin, there's not a lot of mismatches to take advantage of. It's kind of just, all right, stars against stars, and let's see who the better player is.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I mean, again, you got 2 talented rosters, 2 incredible teams. And coming up, we'll be talking about our keys to victory. We'll talk about the injury report early in the week for both these teams, players to monitor. And also, as promised, we'll get into some Thanksgiving side conversation as well, because we can't not do that on Thanksgiving. Stay tuned. Lots to get to on both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Eagles. First, this show is brought to you by Game Time. And going to watch football live is just absolutely incredible. I was actually at the Super Bowl in New Orleans between the Ravens and the 49ers. I was on the side where the lights went out. So look, that doesn't happen every game, and thankfully it doesn't, but it's always great to make new memories at the stadium. Now, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks photos out to fluff the show, only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So if you're looking to find tickets for the Ravens and Eagles game on Sunday in Baltimore, be sure to check out Game Time. They have super deals and a bunch of other tiers of deals as well, and the app has so many awesome features like Game Time Picks, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Game Time ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. Back here on Locked On Ravens and Locked On Eagles, Thanksgiving style crossover Thursday. Kevin Ostrecker, Louie DiBiase still chopping it up with you here. Just a reminder, today's crossover Thursday between Locked On Ravens and Locked On Eagles is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Louie, let's get into some keys to victory here, because I think both these teams have paths to win and they have paths to lose. So let's start off with you and Philadelphia's side of things. What are 3 things Philly has to do to make sure they get the job done on Sunday against Baltimore?
Yeah, it's something they've been doing a really good job of. It's staying in the positive zone of the turnover differential. If you're going to give Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry short fields, that's going to be tough for a good Eagles defense, but for them to hang on in that situation, that's tough. This is already a really difficult offense to defend. You're going to be limited right now with, or I should say thin, when it comes to your defensive line. Brandon Graham out for the year. Bryce Huff still has 3 weeks left on the short-term IR before he can come back to the 53. So I think just don't put the defense behind the 8 ball. I would also say be balanced. I want to see them more balanced on offense. Attack this Ravens secondary, which, again, of all things on that roster, is probably the weaker unit when it comes to run offense, run defense, pass defense. And then the other thing I would say is for the Eagles, what I was saying earlier, don't let, and it's hard to say this because he's the greatest mobile quarterback of all time, but don't limit Lamar Jackson making plays outside of structure. When you get pressure, you got to find a way to get this guy down. Maybe you have a spy on him with Nakobe Dean or Zach Bond, but if the explosive plays come when he gets outside the numbers, Like, that's when magic can happen. So I know that's a difficult ask because it is Lamar Jackson, but you got to try to find a way to limit him when it comes to the scramble drill.
Yeah, I always say there's so many steps to try to actually get Lamar Jackson down, because usually it's just get pressure, sack quarterback.
Yeah,
with Lamar Jackson, it's get pressure and then find a way to not look like you are a high school JV player by Lamar Jackson juking you out of your shoes. And that's just the difficulty. But it's so hard because also when you blitz him, he's solved that. That used to be a weakness. That is now solved. If you blitz him, it's really difficult to stop that. If you don't get pressure when you don't rush guys, he can sit back in that pocket and tear you apart. So it's true where when he gets out of the pocket and he can have his receivers work back to him, or now he's drawing pass interference penalties because it's so hard to cover when Lamar's just jogging out there, seeing what's available. You're going to have to rip a guy or hold a guy to make sure they don't separate from you. So he's like the Torrey Smith of the Ravens, of drawing those big pass interference penalties. Now, for the Ravens side of things, 3 things that I think Baltimore needs to do is, 1, they have to clean up on the penalties. I mean, it's getting ridiculous at this point. They're the highest penalized team in the league. They're the only team with triple-digit penalties this year with 101. They average 8.5 per game, which is a lot. You know, usually the saying is you can't win with more than 6, and here they are at 8-4, and they're averaging 8.5. So they were able to get the job done with 9 on Monday night. They had 12 the previous week in Pittsburgh and lost. The thing with the penalties is it sets you back. They did a better job of not having that be a thing on Monday night, where it wasn't stalling out drives or anything. But they've had many times where they get a nice 8-yard run from Derrick Henry on first down. No, sorry, holding. Instead of 2nd and 2, it's 1st and 20. And that just, it kills you. It's brutal. So just don't make those self-inflicted mistakes. And as a lot of people have said, the Ravens' biggest opponent sometimes is themselves. If someone beats you, have it be the Eagles. Have the Eagles go out there and earn that win. Yeah. Don't give the game to Philadelphia. Second, I mean, this is an easy one, right? Limit, like you said, Saquon Barkley. I don't think you can necessarily stop him. I think he's too good of a player. But the Ravens could potentially be getting Michael Pierce back on Sunday, which would be a really big boost to their run defense. He's been out with a calf injury on IR for the past month or so. So he'd be a big boost to them. But you know, you can't get washed out in the second level. You can't let Saquon get going. And then also trying to stop him as a receiver, which Baltimore has had trouble defending running backs and tight ends out of the backfield at times. So you have to be able, whether it's Roquan Smith in there or not, trying to defend Saquon and limit his damage. And essentially, again, make someone else beat you. Even if it's A.J. Brown, just make someone else beat you. I think you're more confident and comfortable in that, or at least you accept that more because you know Saquon's going to be the focal point of that offense. And finally, for Baltimore on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's just being able to block effectively. You know, even though, Louie, you mentioned Brandon Graham, Bryce Huff both not being in, the Eagles still have no shortage of good pass rushers, especially on the interior. Their interior presence, they have, I mean, I can't, we'd be here all day if we were to go into a scouting report on all these guys because they have so many of them. We talked about Milton Williams before the show. Obviously, they have a bunch of other players as well. They can generate really quality interior pressure on Lamar. It's not the be-all, end-all. If you get pressure on Lamar, like we talked about, he can escape and make things happen. But he is at his best when he can sit back there in a clean pocket and throw the ball. If he can get out of the pocket, he's still great at doing that. But if you can block effectively, that to me is the really, really big key here, at least for the Ravens side of things.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it for both sides is maybe try to like suffocate these quarterbacks and push them up the pocket because when they get outside of the numbers, like Jalen, like Lamar Jackson this year has been very good passing on the run and making explosive plays happen when it's not the design play. So again, it's not an easy task to stop Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry. I think for defenses, it's both of these defenses really just about limiting those guys. And it might come down, Kevin, this feels like a game where it's going to come down to maybe whoever has the ball last. I think it's going to be a close game in the fourth quarter for sure.
Yeah, I would not be shocked. And then you have two who were, you know, Tucker's the greatest kicker of all time. Jake Elliott's had a really solid career, but two guys who have certainly had their fair share of struggles this year.
They've struggled this year,
and
for sure.
You know, I don't know. It could be maybe a revenge game for either one of those guys potentially. Tucker was good on Monday night, but man, kickers this year, it's just been a weird kicker year, just across the league in general. I don't even know what to make of it. Now, on the Ravens injury side of things, 3 players didn't practice for them. Charlie Kohler he broke his arm. He's going to be on IR. He's not going to play in this game at all. Arthur Millette has not practiced with a calf or knee injury for the last couple of weeks now. And then Kyle Van Noy, hamstring, neck. He did not practice. Roquan Smith returned after missing last week. Travis Jones, Sanusi Kane, and I mentioned Michael Pierce. They're all also back at practice. So Ravens decently healthy, not fully healthy, obviously, but decently healthy. Is Philadelphia looking okay injury-wise, or what's their situation?
Yeah, pretty much for the most part, they're healthy. I would say there's 2 guys to keep a close eye on. 2 guys did not practice today, one on offense and one on defense. That's noteworthy. Devontae Smith did not practice, still dealing with that hamstring injury that kept him out of Sunday's game against the Rams. He's been dealing with that for about a month now. It's why even when he was playing after that Jaguars game, he's been pretty limited. So Devontae, we'll see if he can get back to practice tomorrow, Friday. Might be a game-time decision there. Darius Slay still in concussion protocol. He did not practice today, so got Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, but it could be Isaiah Rodgers on Sunday instead of Slay. Slay's been in and out of the lineup a lot this year, so those are the 2 guys I'm watching the most is Slay and Smitty to see if what their status will be. We'll probably know a little bit more on, I would say Friday, we'll have a good idea if they're going to play.
Yeah, that's usually the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And, at least for the Ravens side of things, they like to be very to the vest with their injuries. They don't like a lot of spoilers. Yep. They like any competitive advantage that they can get. So maybe not a ton of news, especially for the maybe game time decision players, but we'll see how it goes. Now, let's do it, Lou. Let's talk about these Thanksgiving sides. All right, give me 3. Top 3 Thanksgiving sides.
So I can only load up my plate with 3. That's tough because it's all about the sides for me. I'm not a turkey guy.
Okay,
all
right.
I'm anti-turkey. If I'm going to eat turkey, I want the dark meat. I want the leg or the
wing.
All right,
hey, I'm with it.
So it's all about sides for me. If I had to go 3, number 1 is green bean casserole. You get those French onion crusties over top, too. I know that's not a super popular first one.
Yeah.
Number 2, and this is specific, stuffing, but it has to be stovetop. I'm not a stuffing guy that you put in the turkey. I don't like it soggy. I like it a little crisp. I feel like the stovetop does it better.
Yeah.
And then number 3, like just the classic. Like give me a mashed potato and gravy. But I'm not one. Can I tell you one that I will never put on my plate?
All right. What?
Cranberry sauce, especially in patty.
Yeah,
form.
I'm not.
Disgusting. I can't stand it. Like the marshmallow yams and those too. Like I don't want dessert on my plate during the Thanksgiving meal. That's for afterwards, and I feel like some of those sides are, I think, just a little bit too ambitious for me.
Well, the thing with the cranberry sauce is sometimes when you get like the canned one, it looks like a can of dog food, and you're like, I don't want to.
Disgusting.
You're
like, people just eating that straight up. I would get it if you're like spreading it on a biscuit or something.
If you're prepping it,
if you're using it like a jam,
yes,
that makes sense. But some people just eat it like a monster, like just the patty itself, just eating it with a fork, and it's. I don't know. It's very unappealing to me.
No, yeah, I'm not a cranberry guy either. Number 1 for me, I gotta go mac and cheese.
I know it's an honorable mention. I like.
It's very controversial for some people whether it actually is a side or not. I know some people say yes.
My family never used to do it. I finally started to implement it.
Right, and you gotta get the breadcrumbs on top. You get multi cheese. Like you gotta have all that. Number 2, I'm going exactly you. I'm going stuffing, and if I had to specify, I'm with you where I don't want it like any turkey stuff. Like I'm just give me it plain.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that. Number 3, I'm going bland. I'm just going a plain old buttered roll. Give me the buttered rolls.
No Hawaiian roll? Is it a specific kind of roll, or what are we talking here? Just a dinner roll?
I'm not too picky. I think the dinner rolls are what I'll go with. I'm not too picky
with the dinner roll, we do a honey butter. That's pretty solid, too.
Oh, that sounds.
So it's almost like a cinnamon sugar honey butter over top.
Yeah, I went somewhere. I went somewhere one year where it was truffle butter, and that was nuts.
The rolls, again, if it's top 5, they would probably be in there for me too.
Yeah.
So I don't hate that. That's a good ranking. It's Thanksgiving. Again, it's all about the sides.
Very, very underrated. And I'm sure, look, there are plenty of other sides we could talk about. We could have this conversation for hours.
Don't get me
started. I'm sure. Yeah, 100%. Louie's awesome. Really appreciate him stopping by and giving some great Eagles insight. Big game for the Ravens coming up in week 13. Hopefully they can pull out the win. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens here on Thanksgiving. Again, really appreciate everybody so much. I'm so thankful, obviously, for friends, family, But I'm thankful for the communities we've built up over here on Locked On Ravens, video form, audio form. It truly does mean the world to have so much support here on this show and on this channel. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on the way out. Hit that follow along and subscribe button as well in audio form. We give you the same show, both audio and video. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be rounding out the week. More Ravens covers and content. So stay tuned. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.